So it's now time for the moment of truth. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Hopefully, you've already met him during the networking session. But we're talking about Vishal Kapoor, who is currently a senior director at Shipt. He is a product leader who has built, launched, and scaled several products at various companies. And I met Vishal when I attended one of his keynotes at the Product World Conference in Oakland in February this year. And his talk really busted a lot of myths that I had about product management. And we both serve as the product advisory members for an organization called as Dev Network. So it's been great to witness everything that he shares about product management. And I feel he is a mentor to me through his articles on product management. He recently did a blog on having challenging conversations in the workplace and shared a framework for giving and receiving feedback. So it's inspiring to witness the passion that he brings to the product management space. And it's a privilege that we as a community get to share some of that energy with all of you today. So hopefully you enjoy his talk, and over to you, Vishal.
I just wanted to start off by thanking Pendo, by thanking Product Tank, by thanking Ketki and Glenn, Chad obviously, for organizing me and giving me the opportunity to come up here and then share my thoughts with you. So I'm going to talk about, the title of the talk is that winning is a byproduct. And I'm going to share 3 rules that I believe I have learned through experience, through my various journeys, through different building products at different companies. What are these 3 golden rules that you should follow as you look to build great products, and building these great products becomes an outcome, essentially, right? So how do you do that? How do you build products? How do you build a great career is something that we're going to talk about. Very quickly about me, I am an engineer turned product manager. I used to write code for search engines like Bing, like Yahoo back in the day. But I think the product bug actually was biting me for a long time. And somewhere down the road, there is a game called Words with Friends. Has anybody heard of Words with Friends? Awesome. Yeah, I can see a few hands. Used to be super, super popular back in the day. There's a funny story that Alec Baldwin once got kicked off the plane because he refused to stop playing the game. That was probably a PR plant, but so the story goes. So I was a PM on Words with Friends. That's where I started, and just learning, how to build product for a game that typically has very, very short shelf life. People get bored of games and they want to see like the next thing and the next thing, etc. It was incredibly educational, if you will, right? Like coming from a company like Zynga, there was an article published by a guy, his name is Lenny Rachitsky, if you guys follow him. He recently published an article which said, which are the companies that are very, very data-driven? And Zynga was actually the number 1 in that list, which is above everything else, like Google's, Facebook's, you name it, right? It was the number 1 company. So it was a great educational experience, learning to build product for a game, very, very, unforgiving space, if you will. But from there, then I actually transitioned to Lyft. I worked on some surge pricing type of problems, built product for that. And now I'm a director of product at Shipt. And Shipt is a gig company. For those of you who don't know what Shipt is, it is a delivery company. It was the largest acquisition of Target.com in the history of Target. And it is a 3-sided company. If you think about your DoorDashes, your Uber Eats, your Instacarts, it's like that. So there is one side which is the customer that places the order. There is one side which is the store where the orders are, where the inventory is. And the third side is the gig side, which is the shoppers themselves. I am on that side. And just to give you a sense of scale, I have products and I have teams where the P&L impact of the work that we do is about $1 billion every year, right? So in 2021, 2022, each year the products and teams that I have disburse $1 billion into the pockets of the shoppers. So it's a very, I love to keep the code of Spider-Man in the back of my mind. It's a lot of power, a lot of responsibility. So it brings we need a lot of rigor and discipline in order to build product at a scale like that, which has such a large impact on the company's bottom line. So With that, I would also request if you guys want to network with me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active. Would love to share back, pay back to the community. And I think one of the things that Ketki mentioned was I am hiring for my own team. So if you guys, I know that the industry is going through a difficult time. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll definitely make sure that I get back to you guys. All right, with that, so this talk is actually structured in two parts. The first part is I want to talk about what does it take for somebody to be a good PM. And I was having a talk with Ketki, even before we got here, even before I got on the stage. And the conversation was that sometimes it feels that product management is a very, very hazy space. It's not very clear how you can become successful as a PM, right? It's not very well defined. There's no school. Well, maybe there's one or two programs now, but there's not like a formal education that you can get to become a good PM. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And then the second part is, from there, if you wanted to become a product leader, what are some of the things that you need to focus on? What are those 3 rules, golden rules that you need to focus on in order to build great things? And the great things become an outcome, right? So that's sort of how the talk is structured. We'll get into the first one. So what does it take to become a great PM? According to my experiences and my ideology is that this is what I like to call as 7 virtues of being a PM. So you have a set of talents and you have a set of skills. There are 2 talents and 5 skills, according to what I believe. And these, in my mind, they are all exclusive. Like, they don't overlap with each other. So what does that mean? So for talents, I would say that great PMs have 2 unique qualities which you will not find in other PMs who have not achieved that level of being better than everybody else. The first one is that great PMs are extremely inventive. And by that I mean, somebody comes up with the idea that you can actually build a phone, which you can actually put in your pocket and you can actually have the world at your fingertips. It's not easy, right? The famous quote that Steve Jobs, I'm clearly quoting Steve Jobs here, but the famous quote that Steve Jobs used was, if you asked Henry Ford, right, if Henry Ford went and asked customers, what do you want? They would actually say, we want a faster horse. Right? But Ford, he actually invented the automobile and things like that. So first thing is that these guys are sort of visionaries, and they are able to find these disparate ideas that happen in society, that happen in different products, and they are somehow able to sort of connect these together better than other people, right? The second thing is that these guys are also extremely futuristic, which means that the way it plays out in real life is they don't make a lot of mistakes. They have very good judgment. It's just intuition, where if they try an experiment, if they try to try an idea, try to run with an idea, more likely than not, that idea is going to work and that idea is going to actually resonate with people. The interesting thing is that the unfortunate thing with talents is that this is something that you're born with. Like, it's in your DNA. It's difficult, candidly. It's very difficult to become a Steve Jobs. It's very difficult for somebody, to anticipate where the world is going and to, not make mistakes and always take bets which are always moving your company or your business forward or your product forward. So these are hard. So what can you do, right, to become a good PM? What you can do is you can actually develop a set of skills, and those set of skills can actually help you become a superlative PM compared to everybody else, become better than the average. And the way I define it is that there are these 5 set of skills that you can develop as a PM. So the first one is that great PMs are extremely accountable. I start here. I will start at accountability. And by accountability, I mean this ability to take ownership of a problem. And one of the quotes that I heard from a VP of product at Facebook, which stuck with me, very recent quote is, every problem is my problem until I find an owner for that problem. Right? So that kind of a mentality, which is, I am accountable, I am an owner, and I operate from an ownership point of view. One of the things that I, when I coach my teams, especially junior PMs in my teams, one of the things I like to tell them is, think of yourself as, imagine if this product was a mom and pop store, right? A small business. You were running, let's say, a small restaurant or a cafe. What kind of accountability would you have? What kind of decisions would you make so that you could actually, achieve great outcomes? Operate with that sense of accountability and ownership for the part of the business that you have. For the product is a tool to, achieve a business outcome. So operate with that kind of accountability to be able to get there, right? So first thing is have accountability. And I think an outcome of that accountability is something that I'm not sure if people have heard this term, but we use the term high agency, which is you're able to sort of find your ways around roadblocks. You're able to unblock yourself and move around some of the obstacles that you find. So PMs who are extremely accountable have this quality, have developed this skill. PMs who are great have developed this skill. Number one, they act as owners. And number two, they actually try to find ways around obstacles and still, get things done, if you will. So that's the first one. Second is analytical. Again, this list is not random. Analytical means that these guys, the way I like to phrase it is they pick and plan with numbers. So what does that mean, right? Picking means, prioritizing ideas. Out of all the ideas that you could execute as a product manager, there are all these things that you can do. Which ones do you actually go after? Because the ones that you are going after are creating an opportunity cost for the ones that you're not going to do, right? Because you're investing your team's time, your company's time into doing something, which you're not investing that time into doing something else. So picking is very important, and usually the way we do it at our teams, for example, is we try to model clear returns on investment. And even at Zynga, for example, right, I use that Words with Friends as an example, that company. So one of the things that we used to do, which we try to do, this is me getting a little tactical. When we come up with ideas or when we write product requirement documents or anything like that, any specification like that, one of the things that we like to put in there is something called an expected outcome, which is if I do this, and this is the number that I'm trying to meet, how much do I expect this number to move? And that's sort of that is sort of the level of rigor. You have to come up with a best guess. Obviously, you can't predict the future, but come up with a guess as to how much, given these 5 ideas, each of these ideas, what do I expect that number to move? Each of these, how much will that metric move, for example? So that's one thing, picking with numbers and then planning with numbers, which is making business cases. If you want to, go and pitch an idea to C staff, right? Like to your executive team, if you want to get buy-in for launching something that has never been done before, trying something, you got to be able to speak the language of numbers and be able to actually make that pitch, right? So that's the second one. The third one is they are obviously exceptional communicators. They are storytellers. I think a lot of emphasis in my teams, for example, is even when we make decks, for anything at work, I think the first emphasis is what is the story? Like, what are we trying to say? It's fine, like the slides have graphs and there are takeaways and so on and so forth, but what is the overall story that we are trying to say, right? Like every slide needs to, for example, have a clear takeaway beyond the numbers, right? So it's sort of like working backwards from the story that you're trying to tell. So they are exceptional communicators. They are very persuasive. And it's a skill that they have developed over time where they can actually convince other people on how to convince them, right? So it's a skill. It's a skill that you learn over time. Fourth one is they are exceptionally collaborative, and I think this is extremely underrated. Collaboration is one of those skills that I will say is extremely underrated. So one of the things that I think separates the best of the best PMs from everybody else is that the best PMs are actually, they are willing to embrace conflict. They take conflict as a given in life. When you are in a company with a diverse set of, even in this room, with a diverse set of individuals, let's say if you were a company and we were building product together, we are expected to have different opinions, right? Because that's how we make things better. But the best PMs don't get anxious from that, don't get frustrated from all these different opinions. They actually tactically figure out, they actually strategically figure out, how do I navigate all these opinions and still build a good product? Right? Like what is, I'm not gonna, make this personal. I'm actually going to take the point that the person expressing the opinion is trying to make, and I'm gonna actually improve the product through that point. So they are very, very good at embracing conflict. I took a long time, candidly speaking, to develop this skill because, you always get in your own way, I would say. I used to get in my own way a lot, but I think, suspending that ego, getting to a point where you are actually looking to what you need to do versus who is doing it or how it is being done. And sometimes the feedback comes in very, very harsh ways, candidly. But you have to listen to the feedback. You have to listen to, either you do that and you listen to the feedback while you have the time, or you basically launch something which you think is good because you have not listened to anybody and you fail, right? So what is a better outcome? So I think these great PMs are extremely collaborative. They embrace conflict. They know how to, also if there are different points of view, they know how to negotiate, create this negotiation between people. And sort of move decisions forward, if you will. It's funny. I'll give you guys a funny story. we recently did a poll at work, actually a few months ago, we did a poll at work, and we said, we just went around, PMs in the room, and we said, what are the two professions that you think are the closest to being a product manager? One of the professions that, spoiler alert, one of the professions was we are like consultants. Obviously, we need to have very highly informed opinions, right? That's what consultants do. The second was, not surprisingly, they're politicians, which is they need to be able to influence people without authority. They need to be able to navigate conflict, bread and butter of being a politician. They need to be good communicators, etc. But those are the two. If you want to like model yourself, as a PM behind like any two people that you find, I would say, find a good consultant, find a good politician, and try to model your behavior behind them. That would actually make you successful. And I think the last one is sort of obvious. I think, again, I think where we started the talk was that there isn't a good way of building product at a company. Unfortunately or fortunately, it is extremely subjective, not just to the company, but also to the team, in fact, to the manager itself, right? Like, the way that we have established culture in my team, for example, or the teams that I lead, versus, for example, some of my other directors, it may be slightly different because they are actually doing a different type of product. One of the things that, the things that I do, like we own like sort of a lot of backend and machine learning heavy products at the company, which, help drive all these numbers, versus another director that I have, my peer, actually handles experience. So he handles all the app and things like that. So it's a very different way of making decisions. It's a different level of rigor. It's a different level of polish that you need, different kind of thinking that you use for building products for one situation versus the other. So they are lifelong learners. Mentorship is getting mentored by other people and actually paying it forward is something that I think any great PM is just always looking to learn from others and looking to pay back. I have a lot of mentors myself. I'm always looking to find mentors. If any of you want to mentor me, I would be happy to talk to you. But that's the spirit, ultimately. You are trying to learn from people who have been there and done that before you and make yourself better every day. All right, so that was that. Now we'll talk about the rules that I think are, so once let's say you are a good PM or you have a good PM team, how do you go from that to actually now doing great things? That's good, right? That is all good. You can deliver individual products, but how do you basically, like, what do you focus on in order to achieve great outcomes? So there are 3 golden rules according to me. The first one is you focus on people, right? I think, again, this is not random. The first thing is that you focus on people, right? It's the way I like to say this is, and I will be candid, I learned this lesson a little bit later in my life. I would have benefited a lot more had I learned this earlier in my life. But one of the things that I did not do, which I'm trying to get better at, candidly speaking, is I'm trying to get better at keeping in touch with the people that I worked with before, getting back in touch with people that I worked with before, some of the people that I admired. I never put in the time and the effort to do that. Guess what? These are the people, some of the people that I work with now are, all these product leaders at all these other companies. And I lost the opportunity of being able to keep in touch with them. So that is something that, make sure that, you index on people first. You actually start with people first. Technologies will change, right? Like, one example is, Web 3.0 or even fintech generally is going through a little bit of an ebb and flow. Right now it's ebbing a little bit, if you will. But if those are the same people who work for all these companies, these smart people who will basically end up building, the next big thing, building the next ChatGPT, building the next, whatever the next technology is. I had to throw in ChatGPT in there, didn't I? So, so make sure that you guys, build your relationships as you are becoming a leader. Make sure that the relationships are super important. So make sure that you index on that. A couple of examples, a couple of anecdotes I'll give you is that one of the things that I did was, have a high bar for those of you who manage others. Have a high bar for sort of building your team. One of the examples I'll give you is that when I joined, I won't name the company, but when I joined one of my companies and I built a team from scratch, I wasn't happy with the process. When I came in, I felt it was very subjective. It wasn't like, very well defined. I literally sat down with a Google document and I literally wrote all the questions that I wanted people to ask. I went and recruited a panel of different people. I got people from design. I got people from data science. I got my engineering partners. I got people from business. I constructed like an entire interview process. And then I went around, and then I used that to hire. Just to give you guys an example, the bar of hiring in the team was, I set the bar pretty high, candidly, but we got about 100 applications. We did about 150 video interviews with different folks. Ultimately, we over a period of 8 months, ultimately we hired 3 PMs. Right, so I'm just like, that's sort of the bar that you want to set. If you want to run $1 billion business, you got to set the bar that high, right? Otherwise, you're not setting yourself up for success. You're not setting your team up for success. So just have very, very high bar for the team, and have very high bar for hiring somebody. But then I think on the flip side, I want to be empathetic, right? Especially given whatever is happening in the world today, especially in the tech sector today. Once you do that, work as hard as you can to the core of your bones to keep them, because ultimately this is about people, right? You don't want to treat people as commodity. You don't want to treat them as like resources that you can just move around. The relationships are more important than anything else. So I would say really, really focus on those two things, and I start there, right? Like as a leader, you first want to start there, and then focus on anything else. So that's the first golden rule, according to me. The second one is, I'll give you guys 3 quick stories. The second one is, you need to have very, very clear goals and very clear metrics. And this is one of those things as a PM that, it's very, very easy to get lost in what we call as vanity metrics, like, measure everything to a point where you don't know what you are really measuring, right? So I would say have very, very clear goals. I'll give you guys 3 examples. So the first one is a story from Google. And this was, Larry Page wrote a blog. You can actually probably Google this. Larry Page wrote a blog where he said, more wood behind fewer arrows. So, of those of you who remember, Google had this thing called Google Plus, right? Which was, Google's answer to Facebook's social network, and they built like all these features and so on and so forth. I even remember the people who were behind Google Plus, the VP of product, etc. At some point, Google realized that they were just not going to be good at that, and they had to sort of pull back from that initiative. So the letter that was sent, that Larry Page sent publicly, as they were, it was a very visible initiative for them. Like, trying to go after Facebook was very big for them. So he sent a letter saying, more wood behind fewer arrows, which means have fewer priorities, have fewer products, but just like double, triple down on them, and just be relentless on the products that you want to focus on, right? Like their core search, their ads, their things like that, for example. So that is one example. Have very, very clear. Don't try to do too many things. Try to do as less as possible, but be very, very good at that. That's the first thing. Second story comes from Facebook. And this story is, as the story goes, in the early days of Facebook, when I think Facebook was about 150 people, very, very small company, Mark had hired one of his first PMs, Zuckerberg had hired one of his first PMs. And so at the time, Facebook was growing like a weed. And I think a lot of us here in this room know that the term growth PM basically started at Facebook, right? Like the guys at Facebook, built this discipline called growth PM, et cetera, and now it's like a specialization everywhere. So Mark was very, very focused on growth, and this other PM, who was one of the new hires, actually came into a meeting room with Mark, and he started whiteboarding, and he basically drew all these diagrams. And what he was trying to convince Mark was, we should actually focus on building a sustainable business, which means, we should actually figure out a way to monetize the users that we have. So revenue, right? Like not just, growth at all costs. We need to monetize them, so we need to focus on revenue as well. So, this went on for like about 30, 35 minutes. They went back and forth. There was a whiteboard. This guy's drawing all kinds of charts and graphs on the whiteboard, and he's trying to convince Mark, and Mark is in the room. Mark doesn't do anything for 35 minutes. He's just listening in. He's famous for, I think if any of you guys have seen The Social Network, he's famous for just like doing his thing on his computer. So that's what he's doing. After 35 minutes, he gets up, and this is the story. This is the way the story goes. He basically takes a red marker. This guy was writing with a blue marker, I guess. And this guy, Mark takes a red marker. He basically like draws a big X on the entire whiteboard, and he writes one word, which is growth. Right? And that's it, like end of story. And he walks out of the room, he drops the marker, he walks out of the room. So my point is that is the kind of focus that it takes to get to 3.5 billion users, right? Over half of the population on planet Earth, like getting to that kind of scale, that kind of focus is necessary for somebody to be able to break ties So as great leaders, when you are driving outcomes, that is the other thing that you need to be mindful of as well. And then the third one is, one example I will give you guys is, we have one of the products that I have at the company is our equivalent of Uber Pool. So what we do is, let's say a delivery person, a shopper, we call them shoppers. A shopper is going from a store to deliver an order to, let's say, a destination, to some customer. Can we actually give them multiple orders while they are, on the same route, which is basically Uber Pool, if you think about it. When I started at the company about 2+ years ago, we have this one KPI. This is one team, and I have other teams as well. For this one team, the North Star, the main KPI that we were measuring was something we call bundling rate, which is of all the orders that are coming to ship, millions of orders, how many do we bundle, right? When I started at the company about two years ago, we were at 7%. And we focused on that one KPI, relentlessly focused on that one KPI, and we ended this January peak holiday season at about 50%. And if you think about it, right, like if you take a step back, maybe that example is not relatable, but if you imagine of all the rides coming to Uber, half of the rides are actually going through Uber Pool or shared rides. It is a massive scale, and that is the kind of focus that it takes. We had to, fight with everybody and everybody else because, people would come up with all these different metrics. Why can't you look at this? You should look at that, this and that. And we were like, growth at all costs, right? Like, we are going to scale this up. So it is the same idea. I mean, I didn't draw an X on any whiteboard, but it was the same idea. We indexed our teams, we anchored our teams around one metric, and we just kept focusing on that one. So that's the second one. And the last one, this is sort of a little bit of a necessary evil. It's not the sexiest part of being a product manager, but I think it's necessary. I think that process is necessary, personally. And what process does is that being PMs is hard, right? Like, we influence others without authority. I think one of the challenges that we have is we are not the ones who can make anything happen. And I think I emphasize this to a lot of my cross-functional partners. We don't have the resources. I'm not an engineering manager. I'm not a data science manager. I'm not a design manager, for example. And my team is not individual contributors. They are not the builders. They are not going to be able to build it. They are strategists, right? They are not going to be able to build it. They're going to figure out the what and the why. They're not going to be able to do the how to build software, right? So that's those teams. But as a result of that, I think even in technology generally, right? Engineering teams, for example, if you look at ratios, it's 1 PM to, like sometimes 7 engineers up to 10 engineers. So the engineering teams are a lot larger compared to product teams, for example. So you have to influence without direct authority and so on and so forth. I think one thing that helps a lot is having process. Is just having like a clear working protocol between different teams. I think one of the other stories I will give is, have people heard of this person called Gokul Rajaram by any chance? Anybody here knows who Gokul Rajaram is? Okay. So this guy was one of the early PMs at Google. He worked with Eric Schmidt and Larry Page and some of those guys. Then he went to Facebook. He actually was a very big PM at Square. When they started Cash App and things like that. So now he's an investor. But one of the stories that he has is he and 2 other leaders went to a meeting with Eric Schmidt. And so he was the PM, and there was an engineering manager, and I think there was somebody from operations. They were all VPs at the time, so they were very, very high-level leaders. They go into a meeting with Eric Schmidt, and so they try to explain an idea. All of them are going at it, and so they are looking for a decision, right, at the end of it. So Eric basically stops them mid-sentence. They are going somewhere. Eric stops them, and so he's like, okay, so it feels like you guys are looking for a decision. If I was to ask you guys who will make this decision, who wants to make the decision? All 3 of them actually raised their hands. And then they kind of looked at each other very embarrassingly because it wasn't clear who was the decision maker, because everybody thought they were the decision maker. And this is a big problem, because if everybody thinks that they are the ones who are right, then nothing gets done, because you're just kind of kicking the ball around. And that is a problem that happens in a lot of companies. I've seen that even in some of the projects that I work on, for example. Sometimes it happens. So I think who will decide this? It is important to use process, at least, I think, where there's a clear working protocol, so that it's very, like, the rest of it is very efficient. Like the way you push product is very, very efficient. And I think the last one is a classic question that PMs have, which is I feel like I'm not a product manager. I feel like I'm a project manager. So I'm project managing. Like I feel like decisions are being handed over to me, and people are treating me as like a dumping ground essentially. So they come to me with do this and that, and I'm just like somebody who's just expected to execute and get things done. That happens a lot, and I think my answer to that is process is important, but I think another answer to that is through process you need to define like who does what. Like is your job, for example, creating tickets, or is your job going and finding these opportunities and ideas? And process can help disambiguate that to a large degree without creating conflict, right? So one of the things that I'll say this last thing and I'll stop here. One of the things that I like to emphasize a lot with my PMs is PMs are not farmers, they're hunters. So your job is to go and find and hunt for these opportunities that will be game-changing and needle moving for the company. You're not responsible for, once there is an opportunity, project manage it, groom it. Yes, you're responsible for making sure it happens, but that is not the core of your job. The core of your job is to be a strategist and come up with these winning ideas to differentiate your company and yourself in the marketplace. So with that, I will just take any questions.
Yeah, so we have a very creative process of taking questions this time. If you have questions, you get a little spotlight. You come to the mic here, and the other people who have questions can then line up. So we don't get to decide the order, you get to decide it. And you have about 10 minutes to ask your questions then.
Hi. Okay. It feels a little bit weird to stay facing us to the audience. Hi, thank you so much. That was super, super useful. Amazing insights. I have a question regarding collaboration. I think in general, product manager is like, it's a bridge between business stakeholders, between technological stakeholders. And you have a process in place. You have who are decision maker. You have like a goals for the company, everything what you mentioned. But then you're facing that your sales organization is pretty much dumping on you some projects or some products because this will be driving their KPIs.
Yeah.
Your advice, because you mentioned not to be frustrated with opinions, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm like, have some problems sometimes. How to like keep them accountable, because sometimes you're saying yes for that project and you're trying to show the KPI in the beginning and in the end, they're not what we're expecting.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
Yeah, so can you elaborate a little bit more? So when you say that the KPI at the beginning and the end is not what you're expecting, are you saying that you executed the product, you built it, and then at the outcome, when you looked at the KPI and how it influenced, you saw that the results were not what you expected? Is that what you're saying?
Projected revenue is not according to what we put in the beginning, and like the users are, you mentioned, users are not using this, or like the projected revenue stream is not correct,
Right.
and like this happening based on the data driven, like I see from the data, this happening every time, but the sales, they're driven by KPIs. They sold the project or they renew the contract.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. I think this phenomenon generally in when you're building product is generally called, you can look this up, it's called HIPPO, which means highest paid person's opinion, right? Which is somebody in the room who has a high rank, has a high say, is just basically going to you and telling you need to do this. I think there is one way of doing this gracefully, and this is what I've tried. Well, you know what? For the first time, I think you should try to sort of size the problem down to as small of a project that you can execute in order to prove. So if you as a PM have a very strong intuition that this is not going to actually make an impact, which I think the reason that you are defensive about even any of this is because you think it's not going to work, and probably you're right? So I would say that first try to slice the problem down to that one small thing where if that did not move, nothing else matters. You know what I'm saying? Like that one feature or maybe a set of 2 or 3 features, which you can potentially build in a very small amount of time. So try to bring it down to that point. Like, they want you to change the color of the website, or they want you to build push notification, this and that. You come down to that one thing, like that, what is the core action that you want us to do? without which this thing is absolutely going to fail. I think one of the concepts that I love is it's not minimum viable product, it's minimum valuable product. So what is the minimum valuable thing that you want to build? Build it, right? You know that it's going to fail. Build it. Demonstrate that it failed, and you earn your credibility saying next time around, I get a say because I told you so. This happens. This happens. Like I've been down that path. Another advice that I will give you is don't, this is something I try to do with my PMs and my teams as well. Try, when you are in a situation like this, when you know that this is going to fail, try and hedge. Meaning don't put all your effort and all your team's time into one basket, into this one product. Try and see if you can actually build something else which can actually have a positive impact, which you think will have a positive impact. So that if you fail in one situation, you can show that there is positive impact in the other. I would also encourage you very, very much to talk to your manager and very candidly tell them that I don't believe that this is going to be a needle mover, but I'm willing to disagree and commit. Right? One of the Amazon values. So make it clear from the start that I'm not on board with this, but because the organization is asking me to do it, I'm willing to disagree and commit and do this. So in the end, if something goes south, you don't come back and it doesn't actually come back and bite my career, for example. So those are some of the tips that I can share.
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
Geez. So. Oh, here? Okay. Well, it is weird to stand us facing everyone, but. Okay, perfect. Hi. So my question is more about input and ingestion of feedback when it comes to the push and pull relationship between product, understanding resources, engineering, and then commercial, retaining and gaining new business. And there's also, you've been at Lyft. There's the member experience. There's the client experience. There's different sources of feedback from where your customer success teams is ingesting direct client feedback. How do you funnel that through product? There's user to the consumer member feedback that's coming through. How do you reconcile all of the feedback coming from product analytics, member analytics, qualitative, quantitative? When you have different sources of feedback, how do you reconcile all of those insights and help keep a balance between understanding the resources you have versus, the push that commercial teams usually have, which is sales or customer success. And that usual fight, it's always a battle, right? What needs to be built versus what needs to be prioritized.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Something that I'll give you the true answer, which is unfortunately probably not what you're looking for. The true answer is that there isn't going to be this one silver bullet, if you think about it, where you're going to get all the analytics coming from everywhere in the company into this one dashboard. It's never going to happen. Everybody sort of across the company, especially, in bigger companies, everybody sort of follows the protocol that, realistically speaking, everybody at all levels, all the way up from the CEO, all the way down to, somebody that is your peer, even if you come up with an intake form, for example, or a Salesforce ticket or something like that, which we have done, I would recommend doing it, but don't get frustrated if you don't see that everything is not basically working in the way that you expect. That's just reality, right? So first thing I would say is that there is no one holy grail that will solve this problem. Second thing I will say is when you have this push-pull between commercial versus, like you said, prioritization, I would, again, answer in the same way that I answered the first question. If you feel that this is not going to work, it's okay to pare that down. Take something that is cheap enough in terms of effort, not that expensive in terms of time and effort, for you to demonstrate that some of the ideas that are coming down the pipe are not going to help us move, and set the expectation within your reporting chain, essentially, with your manager and above, that I am willing to disagree and commit. I don't think there's value here. I'm willing to disagree and commit. But there are these other things that I think there is a lot of value. And I am also going to make sure that my team also executes on that. It's not like commercial over everything else. It doesn't you balance your portfolio, you hedge your bets, and then I think then you and be realistic, right? At the end of it, if it does move, if the sales team is able to take that feature that you built and it does move the needle, you have to celebrate that. I'll give you an example. So one of the things that is tricky to prioritize with other things is internal tools, right? So we have operations teams, for example, at Shipped, and the teams ask us to build all these tools because we have $1 billion of spend or whatever, And they ask us to give them all these levers in order to sort of manage the algorithms, the machine learning. Like how does it predict here? How does it sort of train there? Can we actually change, what data it is using to train itself? Can we change that, this and that, like whatever, right? Like there are many different ways of doing this. So they come to us with, you need to enhance all these internal tools. And my team, one of my PMs, I'm giving you a real example, at Shipped, one of my PMs actually spent 20-30% of his time in actually supporting that. And we knew, it wasn't clear what is the return on all this 30% time that we are investing in this. We spent it, right? After we did that, after we delivered, so first we disagreed and committed. First we started by talking to them and asking them what is the return on this investment. They couldn't quantify that. It's an internal tool, right? So they couldn't quantify that. Then we basically went to, okay, we'll build it. We built it. And then after doing that, we kept coming back to, okay, what is it buying the business? Why should we continue doing this? Because there are all these other things that we did on the side, and we can tell you what it is buying the business. So how do you justify that, right? So I think at that point, when you prove value in some of the things that you're doing, I think that is one way of shifting the narrative away from some of the things that you don't want to do. We have tried that at the company, so it has worked. Yeah. I think I have time for one more, if anybody has anything else.
I'll do one more real quick one. Hi, great presentation. My name is
Thank
Michael. Coming out of the COVID era, a lot of people are going back to the office, but there's still a lot of people working and managing globally remote teams. I manage a globally remote team of introverts who hate meetings. So my biggest question is, how do you ensure that you're keeping accountability when you're in an environment like that?
How do you mean by accountability? What do you mean?
Just making sure that people are doing what they're doing, moving the ball forward, staying
Right.
focused on the right things. I'm trying a lot of different approaches, working out of documents, sharing information, making sure there's a clear vision,
Right.
using Asana, putting things into there. But still, at times, I feel people get siloed, and I sometimes I'm left wondering, like, where really do we stand? What everything's going on? I kind of feel like maybe it's something obvious I'm missing, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. It's hard. When you, it's hard when you're doing it in a remote environment. It's hard. What has worked for us is I will come back to indexing on goals and being a little more forgiving on the process itself. Not to say that this is not a Lord of the Flies. Like you just have no rules. It's not that. There is a working protocol. There is a way in which we, for example, make business cases for big ideas that we are looking to launch. We will actually go all the way up to our exec team, and we will, size up the business case and pitch it and so on. So there is a protocol. But by and large, outside of that protocol and the working, and this is what I meant by process when I said it. So as long as there is a mature process and people are sticking to it to a reasonable degree, the way I think about this is that process is a means to achieve an outcome. Ultimately, what is important, and even product is a means to achieve an outcome. Ultimately, what is important is what is the outcome that you're achieving. Whether it is through a product, whether it is something that an operations team does manually, whether you build software for it, how it gets built, it is a little bit of that is important, but it is a little less important than what is the outcome. And the way I have found how I have been able to unlock productivity and creativity in my teams is actually focusing on the numbers and not so much focusing on like, how are you getting this done? A little bit of that is just, that's just culture. Like, you file tickets, you do this, you do that. That's just culture, which I think is a baseline which everybody does. But beyond that, it's more like, this is what we promised. This is where we are. Do we think we are going to meet our OKRs, for example? And just leave and just like keep coming back to that. And what do you need? And keep asking the person the question, what do you need in order for us to be able to get there? If you think that you need to be a better communicator, if you think that you need to write things down, because writing is part of the process and you're not doing it, for example, then do it, right? If that's what you need to get buy-in, because you need to write things down on paper before you share it with other people, you should do it. And that is, I think, and I think the thing is, the last thing I'll say, coaching and grooming your team, everybody is different, right? Like, there's a diversity of opinions, there's a diversity of people, and I don't think there is a one size that fits all. Ultimately, everybody learns differently, everybody performs differently, and there is no one silver bullet to say that everybody will be very process-oriented, very process-minded. You kind of have to sort of, fit it to the person that you are actually working with. So that's my best answer. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Awesome.
First, everybody, let's give a round of applause for Vishal. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for the great Q&A.